Just days after my husband passed, his two sons from his first marriage sat across from me, tossed a fake will onto the table, okay, and coldly announced, "We're taking everything. This house, the beach villa, the company, all of it. You've got no rights here." My lawyer was losing his mind. He gripped my hand, begging me, "Don't sign it. We'll sue. We'll win." But I just looked those two in the eye and gave them a calm, steady smile. "Let them have it," I said. "All of it." Can you even believe that? Imagine a woman who gave up her entire career, who spent the last 6 months of her life awake every night caring for her husband as cancer ate him away. A woman who spent 18 years building an empire from nothing right by his side, only to be stripped of everything by the very children she once loved just days after the funeral. Everyone thought I'd snapped. They thought the grief had finally pushed me over the edge. What they didn't know was that this calm was the deadliest weapon I'd ever owned one. I learned from my brilliant husband at the final signing as I put my pen to the very paper they'd drafted to kick me out onto the street. The smug grins on their faces suddenly froze. Their lawyer started to shake. His color drained from his face as he stuttered through the words Victor had secretly added to the final page. "You're all here to personally accept your father's final gift, the entire estate, along with a $5 million debt you knew nothing about. This isn't a story about a weak widow. This was a perfect play, orchestrated from a hospital bed. Stick around until the end to see exactly how greed left them with nothing but a massive bill. And hey, drop the name of your city in the comments. I want to see how far this truth is traveling." The scent of funeral lilies was still heavy in the air when they decided to finish me off. I was sitting quietly in Victor's leather office chair, my late husband's chair. This was where he spent thousands of nights grinding over real estate strategies, where he and I sketched out the future of the Harrington Empire. 18 years of a rock-solid marriage. And now I was sitting across from two men who felt entitled to judge my fate. Marcus, the oldest, wore his grief like a perfectly tailored expensive suit was strictly for show. At 42, he had all of Victor's commanding presence, but none of his warmth. His eyes were cold gray stones, scanning me with the ruthless calculation of an investor evaluating a failing portfolio. "Lena?" He started using that patronizing tone that's rubbed me raw for years. "We need to settle some practical matters. Lucas, 3 years younger, but looking a decade older with his receding hairline and weak jaw, stood beside his brother like a loyal sidekick. If Marcus was the sharp edge of a blade, Lucas was the hidden jab, wrapped in a layer of fake concern. "We know this is hard," Lucas added, his voice dripping with synthetic empathy. "Dad's passing was a shock to all of us. All of us. It was a joke. As if they were the ones who spent every night in that hospital room, holding Victor's skeletal hand. As if they were the ones making the gut-wrenching calls about treatments and pain management. They only showed up for the funeral, of course. Marcus flew in from his venture capital firm in San Fran. Lucas drove over from his debt-ridden real estate office. But during those 6 months when Victor was fading and presence was the only thing that mattered, I was alone. What practical matters? I asked, though a cold shiver was already crawling up my spine. Marcus and Lucas traded a look that's silent, nonverbal shorthand they'd perfected over decades of shared secrets. It was the kind of look that pushed everyone else out of the room, especially someone like me. "The estate," Marcus said flatly. "Dad's legacy, the properties, and the company. We need to restructure the distribution." I felt my fingers tighten around the armrests of Victor's chair. The leather was worn, smooth exactly where his hands used to rest, and I found a tiny bit of comfort in that familiarity. Victor and I had talked about this. He'd assured me everything was set for my future. "Well, right," Lucas said, sounding like I was missing something obvious. "Dad had his terms, but he probably didn't explain the complexity of the current legal situation." Marcus pulled a thick yellow folder from his briefcase and slapped it down on Victor's desk, the same desk where Victor had kissed me goodbye every morning for 18 years. The folder was heavy, carrying that intimidating weight that only legal documents have. "This will is very clear," Marcus continued, opening the folder with dramatic precision. "The main estate, valued at $1.3 million, goes to Lucas and me as co-owners." Every word felt like a knife. The home that held 18 years of my life suddenly blurred, turning into nothing but an asset for two strangers. Marcus looked up, his voice ice cold. "Don't look at me like that. This is just business. Dad took good enough care of you for 18 years. Now we're taking back what belongs to the family bloodline. The house on Puget Sound, worth about $950,000, is also being transferred to us. You've got 30 days to pack your things. After that, the maintenance, the property taxes, the mortgage. That's our problem. You should probably thank us for taking that debt off your hands." Asterisk, the promise of growing old together shattered. Right there, cold as a tombstone. Every number he threw out felt like a punch to the gut. Our home, where Victor and I built a life. Where we hosted those warm Christmas dinners and celebrated every anniversary, gone. The beach villa, where we spent our honeymoon, where Victor first told me he loved me, gone. "And what about me?" I whispered. Lucas shifted uncomfortably, but Marcus didn't flinch. "Well, of course, there's the life insurance. $350,000. That should be more than enough for your future needs." $350,000 for 18 years of sacrifice, building an empire by his side and nursing him through a brutal illness. $350,000 to restart an entire life. "I see," I said, though I didn't see anything at all. This couldn't be real. Victor promised I'd be protected. Kay promised I'd never have to worry about security. "It's not personal, Alina," Lucas said, and the fake softness in his voice made my skin crawl. "Dad just always wanted the Harrington legacy to stay in the bloodline. You get that, right?" The bloodline. As if 18 years of being his wife, of being a stepmother to Marcus and Lucas, meant zero. As if love and commitment were less important than a DNA sequence. "Of course," Marcus added, "we're not monsters. You can stay in this house for 30 days to pack. We think that's more than fair." Fair? They thought 30 days to uproot a lifetime was fair. I looked around the room, memorizing the familiar details that were about to belong to someone else. The bookshelf where Victor kept our first hand-drawn sketches. The window overlooking the garden we designed together. And the small photo on the desk, not of Marcus or Lucas, but of Victor and me on our wedding day. We were both beaming at something I could no longer remember. "There's one more thing," Marcus said, and his tone made me snap my head up. He pulled another document from the folder, smaller, but way more ominous. "This is a minor issue, but it's serious. Dad racked up a massive hospital bill during those last 6 months. Insurance only covered part of it. Still about $280,000 unpaid. Since you were the legal spouse and signed off on all the treatments, the hospital is looking to you for payment." The room literally started to spin. $280,000 in debt, with only $350,000 coming in from the insurance. That meant I'd be left with exactly $70,000 to rebuild my entire existence. "But surely the estate," I stammered. "Estate assets are frozen pending probate," Lucas cut in smoothly. "And based on the specific terms of this will, those debts are considered separate from the inherited properties. It's a shame, but that's just how the law works, you understand?" Stared at them. These two had called me mom with such sugary voices at their father's funeral just days ago. Marcus in his sharp, wrinkle-free suit with those dead eyes. Lucas with his weak features and that concerned voice that was actually spitting venom. "I need time to process this," I finally said. "Of course," Marcus said, standing up and straightening his blazer. "Take your time. Well, remember, that 30-day clock starts tomorrow. And about those medical bills." The longer you wait, the messier it gets. They left me alone in Victor's office, surrounded by the ghosts of the life we used to, half and the crushing weight of this new reality. The silence was deafening. No comfort, no solutions. I sat there as the late afternoon sun stretched across the room, the shadows looking like they were mocking the brightness we once shared. My hand reached out subconsciously to the small drawer in Victor's desk where he kept his personal things. Inside, buried under old receipts and business cards, my fingers brushed against something unexpected. A strange bank card I had never seen before. It was tucked away in a secret compartment at the back. Why did Victor hide it? Looking through the window, I saw Lucas's car still idling in the driveway. Marcus and him were standing close, heads huddled together in a frantic whisper. They were celebrating carving up their inheritance. Neither of them bothered to look back at the house, where their stepmother, their father's wife, sat alone amidst the wreckage of her life. But as I watched them drive away, something strange happened. Inside the car, Marcus leaned toward Lucas, his voice dropping low. She swallowed it, but I'm still worried. What if she finds something of Dad's? Lucas gripped the steering wheel, sweat beading on his forehead despite the AC. Blasting. Relax. I cleaned the place out. We just need to fast-track the paperwork before she wakes up. Instead of the despair I expected to feel, a different emotion started to take root. It started small. It's just a whisper in the back of my mind, but it grew stronger with every second. They think they've won. They think they've successfully erased me from Victor's legacy, turning me into nothing but a nuisance to be handled with the bare legal minimum. What they don't know, what they can't know is that Victor was always smarter than any of his children. And after 18 years together, that brilliance had rubbed off on me. The card in my hand seemed to grow warm, as if it were trying to tell me something. Tomorrow, I'll find out what secret it holds. Tonight, I'll let Marcus and Lucas enjoy their victory. But as I stepped out of the office, I froze. From the window, I saw Lucas's car still parked at the end of the block, the dome light glowing dimly in the dark. He hadn't left. Or was he waiting for me? My heart hammered against my ribs. My scalp prickled like someone was staring right at me from the shadows. I slipped into the darkness of the hallway, holding my breath. Only the steady tick-tock of the living room clock broke the silence. Then my phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. No words, just a photo. It was me standing at Victor's office window right now, taken from across the street. The metallic taste of fear flooded my mouth. It wasn't just Lucas. Someone else was watching. Victor used to whisper in those final nights, "Don't believe what you see, Lena. Sometimes the enemy is closer than you think, maybe even inside this house." At the time, I thought he was delirious. Now, I'm not so sure. I squeezed the card, the cold metal biting into my skin like a reminder. There's no turning back. Have you ever felt like you were being watched but didn't dare to turn around? Harold Jenkins had been Victor's lawyer for 15 years. And in all that time, I had never seen him look as uncomfortable as he did now, sitting across from me in his downtown office. His usual composure was cracked, revealing a worried man behind the professional mask. "Alina," he said, taking off his glasses and cleaning them for the third time in 10 minutes. "I have to advise you as seriously as possible. This is not a good decision." The morning sun poured through the floored-ceiling windows of the 15th floor office, casting a sharp, cold light on everything. Elliott Bay sparkled below us, and somewhere in those gleaming office buildings across the water, people were making rational decisions about their lives. I envied them. "I understand your concerns, Harold," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I've made up my mind." He set his glasses down, his face urgent. "Alina, you have to fight. This will is full of red flags, especially Victor's mental state. We can sue, force them to negotiate. I've stayed up all night reading these docs. I don't get why Victor would shut you out so completely." The language is ice cold, erasing. 18 years of marriage into a few lines about adequate provision. How long would a lawsuit take? I asked. Months, maybe years. Up, Bonina, you have a real shot? I knew Victor, and this will. It's nothing like the man I knew. Harold was about to continue when my phone buzzed violently on the desk. A text. From an unknown number. Stop digging. You don't want to know the truth. I had to drop the phone. My hands were shaking so hard the words blurred. A chill raced from my toes to my head, like ice water being poured down my spine. I showed the phone to Harold, my voice stuttering. Does anyone know I'm here? Harold frowned, his face turning grim. Only my assistant knows the schedule. But, he hesitated, glancing around the office. Lena, if they're tracking you. Single quotes before. I left Harold's office. He shoved a small scrap of paper into my hand. Victor mentioned a safe deposit box at the bank. You're a personal pin. Don't trust anyone. I stuffed it into my pocket. Heart racing. Had Victor anticipated all of this? I swallowed hard, feeling like an invisible pair of eyes was trailing my every move. The man always spoke of you with total love and respect, Harold added. Love and respect. Had I been delusional all those times Victor promised I'd be taken care of? Had I misunderstood his promise that I'd never have to worry about the future? And during all those months of litigation, what will I live on? Marcus made it clear that the $280,000 hospital debt is on me. $280,000, Harold. Even if I won the case later, I'd be bankrupt long before then. Harold clenched his jaw. Marcus and Lucas are playing a ruthless hand. They're betting that you're too scared to fight. He was right. My gut told me this was wrong, but my gut wasn't going to pay the bills or keep a roof over my head. What if I just give them everything they want? I asked quietly. Harold blinked in shock. Sorry, what did you just say? By sign whatever they want, transfer the rights to the properties, and just walk away clean, How fast can we make that happen? Lena, you can't be serious. You'd be signing away your legal right to contest. How fast, Harold? He looked at me for a long time, the professional mask slipping to reveal genuine concern. If you waive all claims and sign the release forms, a week, maybe 2. Why are you even considering this? I looked back out at Elliott Bay, watching a small boat navigate the choppy water. The captain seemed to know exactly where he was going, following some invisible map leading him safely to his destination. Because fighting will destroy me, I finally said. Even if I win, I'll be a different person by the end of it. Bitter, exhausted, and broken. Maybe it's better to take what's offered and build something new. Harold leaned back, studying me with the intensity that made him one of Seattle's top attorneys. Alina, in 30 years of practice, I've never seen a client voluntarily walk away from a 7-figure estate. There's something I'm missing here. There was definitely something he was missing, but I couldn't explain it to him. I couldn't explain the gut feeling that had been growing inside me ever since. I found Victor's secret bank card, and I wasn't alone in that feeling. That night, Victor's sister, Sophia, came to see me. Her eyes were red, her voice thick with regret. Alina, I'm so sorry, she said, squeezing my hand. I have to admit, I had my doubts about your motives when you first joined the family. But watching you stay by Victor's side every single second during those last 6 months, it shamed me. I was wrong about you. I'm on your side now. She took a deep breath. He sent me a letter. She handed me an envelope with that familiar handwriting. The first line read, Sophia, if you're reading this, protect Alina like you would protect my legacy. Tears blurred my vision. For the first time in days, I felt like I had real solid ground beneath my feet. Sophia urged me to use the card, to find the truth, promising to stand by me. I spent the whole night tearing the house apart, checking every drawer, every cabinet, every hidden nook I could think of. Nothing but that card felt heavy with importance. It felt like Victor was trying to reach out from the other side. Maybe I'm just tired, I told myself. Tired of fighting. Tired of being labeled the greedy stepmother trying to steal an inheritance. Maybe it would just be easier to let them have what they think they deserve. Harold's voice turned sharp. Alina, this isn't about what they deserve. This is about Victor's intent. And I'm telling you, as his lawyer and his friend, this will does not reflect his wishes. Before I could reply, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mrs. Harrington, it's Lucas. Can we meet today to discuss the timeline for the asset transfer? I want to make this as smooth as possible for everyone. The politeness was somehow worse than Marcus's cold bluntness. At least Marcus didn't pretend to care about making things smooth for me. It's good they're already planning the handover, I said, showing the text to Harold. His face darkened. They're rushing you. Classic pressure tactic. Alina, I'm begging. You rethink this? Take time to grieve. Don't make irreversible decisions while you're in shock. But I wasn't in shock anymore. The numbness that carried me through Victor's illness was fading, replaced by a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I couldn't fight Marcus and Lucas, their legal teams, their arrogance, and their deep knowledge of Victor's business. But maybe I didn't have to face them head on. If I sign those papers, I said slowly, exactly what am I signing away? Harold sighed heavily, sensing defeat. All rights to the main house, the Puget Sound villa, the business assets, and any joint accounts or investments. You keep the life insurance payout and any personal assets you owned before the marriage. In exchange, they agree to settle the medical debts from the estate before distribution. You walk away clean of those obligations. At least it was something. It would leave me with the full $350,000 instead of just $70,000 after debts. Not enough for forever, but enough to survive while. I figured out my next move. I need to see the exact documents, I said. Harold opened his laptop and started typing. I'll draft something that protects you as much as possible. But Alina, once you sign this, there's no going back. You'll have no legal recourse if you find out something later that would have changed your mind. I understand. Okay, I wondered if I really did. Kai in my purse felt heavier. The card in my purse felt heavier, constant reminder that Victor had left me something, some code or instruction I hadn't cracked yet. Was I making a horrific mistake by giving up so easily? Or was I being led by an instinct deeper than logic? My phone buzzed again, this time Marcus. Mom, we appreciate your cooperation during this difficult time. Lucas and I want the transition to be as painless as possible. Maybe. We can wrap everything up by the weekend. Mom, he only called me that when he wanted something, and it sounded so hollow. Where was that family concern during the 6 months I sat alone in hospital waiting rooms? They want it all signed by the weekend, I told Harold. Of course they do. The faster they get your signature, the less time you have to change your mind. Or get a second opinion. Harold looked at me intensely. Alina, something about this whole situation feels wrong. Marcus and Lucas are acting like they're terrified you're going to discover something that complicates their inheritance. Men don't rush probate like this unless they have a reason to be nervous. The same thought had crossed my mind. In all the years I'd known Marcus and Lucas, they had never been particularly efficient or urgent about anything. Marcus was methodical to the point of being slow, and Lucas was notoriously laid back. This sudden push for a quick settlement felt wrong. Maybe they're just eager to take the reins. I said, though I didn't even believe myself. Or maybe they know something I don't. Harold closed his laptop and leaned in. Alina, I'm going. To ask you one more time, will you take at least 48 hours to sleep on this? Talk to a friend or Sophia, someone who isn't buried in the fallout. I almost laughed. A friend Victor and I had been each other's world for 18 years. We let other friendships fade while we built the Harrington empire. I had been Victor's wife, Marcus, and Lucas's stepmother, but I'd never really figured out who I was as an independent woman. I don't need 48 hours, I said. I've decided. Harold studied me, then gave a slow nod. Fine, I'll draft the paperwork, but I want everything in writing. their agreement to cover the $280,000 medical debt, a clear timeline for the insurance payout, and a clause protecting you from any future claims against the estate. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm about to help you make the biggest mistake of your life. Walking through the marble lobby toward the elevators, I caught my reflection in the polished walls. The woman looking back was someone I barely recognized. Older, sure, but steadier. More present. For 18 years. I was Victor's wife for the first time since he passed. I was forced to find out who Alina Harrington was without that title. I stepped into the elevator and touched the secret bank. Card in my purse again. Victor had left me something. I was sure of it, and whatever it was, Marcus and Lucas didn't have a clue. This card led to a safe deposit box at the National Bank on J Street, a box I never knew existed. But first, I had to get back to the main house in Seattle to find the key. Everything went sideways the moment Sophia and I walked through the door. It turned out Marcus knew about the box too, just not where the key was. He had broken in while we were searching, even cutting the power to plunge the house into total darkness. Sophia and I had to creep through the shadows with nothing but our phone flashlights, hearts pounding at every floorboard creak in the panic. A memory flashed Victor's voice whispering the night we moved in. Where the first light hits, you'll find the key to it all. The antique desk lamp. My hand shook as I reached for it and flipped it over. Leather-scented dust. A tiny, ice-cold key. Then, footsteps outside the door. I know you're in here. Marcus's voice hissed. Sophia squeezed my hand so hard her nails drew blood. I hid the key and pretended to be texting. Marcus shoved the door open. What are you doing here? I just got word from a lawyer, Rebecca Lawson. I lied. My heart racing. Searching for Dad's secret trust documents in his old office. He froze, his eyes scanning the dark room. What trust? It's an offshore one. Harold Jenkins is waiting for me. I held up my phone, pretending I'd just received a ping. Marcus hesitated, then spun on his heel. Before he left, he looked back. You should be careful. Not everyone wants the truth to come out. We made it out, but his words haunted me. Was that a warning or a threat? Once we were safe in the car, I watched the streetlights blur on the windshield, feeling my confidence return. Sophia gripped my hand. You were so brave, she whispered. The next morning, we went to the bank. Patricia, Victor's longtime manager, led us to the vault with sympathetic eyes. Mr. Harrington was very specific about this box, she said. Only you and he have access. He opened it about 6 months ago. 6 months ago. Right when his health started to fail. When his secret business meetings began. The box was larger and heavier than I expected. Patricia left us alone. When the heavy steel door clicked shut, it was just me, Sophia, and a windowless room. The silence was suffocating, save for the hum of the AC. The air smelled of cold metal and old paper. I took a deep breath, my heart thudding against my ribs. My fingers touched the lid ice cold. I lifted it slowly, inch by inch, terrified it might explode if I moved too fast. The iron groaned in the quiet dot inside. Documents were stacked nearly to the brim. Old musty paper. Sophia leaned in, her breath hot against my neck. We stared at each other, eyes wide with a mix of hunger and fear. Neither of us dared to breathe. But the first thing that made us both gasp, wasn't money. It was a yellowed, hand-drawn sketch, the heart of the city project, with my own shaky handwriting from 18 years ago. The memories flooded back. That rainy night, the pitter-patter on the roof, Victor and I sitting side by side drawing our shared dream. You're not just my wife, he'd said. You're the partner in every single idea. But the world only knew Victor Harrington. My name. I've reasoned, do you have any idea how many women are like me? Women who stand behind their husband's success, only for the law to completely deny their intellectual property rights the second he's gone. Victor saw it coming. Sophia threw her arms around me. We both broke down, sobbing from the sheer relief of being recognized and the pure rage of being erased. Victor had protected me until his very last breath. But what else was in this box? Did he anticipate every trap Marcus and Lucas were setting? And I saw it. A printed email? Marcus was plotting to secretly sell the heart of the city land to some shady underworld figure's deadline, 96 hours after Victor's death. Alina isn't an issue. She doesn't know a thing. Reading those words made my blood boil. While I was pulling all-nighters nursing their father, they were busy scavenging from a dying man. The next document was a bank statement for a company I'd never heard of, Harrington Holdings, LLC. The balance, $5.5 million. Tucked underneath was a handwritten note from Victor Alina. This is our real nest egg. The kids think all. My money is tied up in real estate and the company, but I've been quietly moving the bulk of our liquid assets here for months. I had to do this to protect us. $5.5 million. We weren't just okay. We were wealthy. Victor had built a fortress in the shadows while Marcus and Lucas were plotting to rob a man on his deathbed. My hands shook as I reached for the next item. A file labeled Confidential Investigative Report. Inside were photos, financial records, and summaries from a surveillance operation Victor had secretly set up. The photos showed Marcus frequenting notorious high-stakes casinos in Vegas. The timeline proved he'd been making countless trips over the last year, sometimes staying for a week. His financials were even worse. Marcus owed over $230,000 to some very dangerous people. Lucas's file was just as disgusting. The investigation revealed his local real estate firm was actually a front for a series of ghost projects used to defraud investors. He had vaporized nearly $300,000 of people's life savings. Both of Victor's sons were drowning in debt and legal nightmares. No wonder they were so desperate to claw at this inheritance. But the real bombshell was the data from Victor's personal health tracker. It wasn't a report from his private doctor. It was raw data synced to my phone that I had never opened. The conclusion was short but heavy. Victor's heart rate and biometrics proved he was completely lucid and of sound mind when he signed the critical documents. Marcus and Lucas had been telling anyone who would listen that the illness had warped Victor's brain, that he couldn't make sane decisions. This data proved they were lying. Victor was legally competent until the very last second. The final document in the vault was a copy of a completely different will, not the one Marcus showed me. This one was signed just 6 weeks before Victor died. Will left everything to me with absolute power of attorney. A handwritten note in the margin read, "The original is kept at the office of my new lawyer, Rebecca Lawson, not Harold's." My heart was racing as the puzzle pieces finally snapped together. There were two wills. Marcus and Lucas had somehow gotten their hands on an old version and were using it to hijack the estate, while the real final will was sitting safely in a different law firm. But why hadn't this Rebecca lawyer contacted me? Why was I only finding this now? I held Victor's letter with trembling hands and carefully opened the envelope. "My dearest Alina," it began. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone and the boys have shown their true colors. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you all this while I was alive. But I needed to be sure about what they were plotting." The letter explained how Victor became suspicious when Marcus and Lucas suddenly became overly concerned during his illness. Not out of love, but because they were positioning themselves to control his legacy. He hired investigators, moved money, crafted this intricate trap to protect me. The boys think they're inheriting the house and the company. But what they don't know is that I've quietly and heavily mortgaged both assets over the last year. The house has a $1.2 million mortgage, and the company owes creditors $800,000. They aren't inheriting assets. They're inheriting a mountain of debt. I stared at the letter, unable to believe what I was reading. Victor hadn't just protected me, he had handed Marcus and Lucas a poison pill disguised as a golden gift. The life insurance they mentioned is real, the letter continued, but it's not $350,000. It's $500,000. And that extra cushion is to help you start your new chapter. Harold Jenkins was never supposed to handle my estate. I fired his firm 2 months ago, but kept it quiet. The boys must have convinced him to represent the family the second I was gone. The final paragraph brought me to tears. I know this seems brutal, but I couldn't stand by and watch them steal from you the way they've stolen from everyone else. They chose their path, Alina. Now they have to live with the consequences. You deserve so much more than what they intended. For you, take this money, build something new, and don't look back. Love always, Victor. Attached was the business card for a lawyer named Rebecca Lawson, with a note to call her immediately after clearing out the vault. I sat in that small, windowless room for nearly an hour, just processing. Victor hadn't abandoned me. He'd quietly built a bulletproof fortress around me, and Marcus and Lucas, the ones who called me Mom at the funeral, spoke in flowery prose about family and legacy were nothing more than common thieves. But something else made my stomach turn. If they were desperate enough to rob their dying father, what would they do when they found out the inheritance they'd fought so hard for was actually a mountain of debt? Would they hunt me down? Would they try to force me to dig them out of the financial hole Victor had dug for them? I carefully put everything back in the safe except for the card and Victor's letter. I tucked them deep into my purse. Tomorrow I'd call Rebecca Lawson. But tonight I had to sit through dinner with Marcus and Lucas, knowing exactly who they were. I had to smile and nod while they prattled on about their plans for the properties, pretending I didn't know they were inheriting nothing but debt and legal fires. As I drove back, my phone buzzed. Lucas. Alina, he said, his voice warm with that rehearsed affection. My wife and I would love to have you over for dinner tonight. We figured it's a good time for some family bonding before we finalize all the legal stuff. Family bonding. How thoughtful. That sounds lovely, I replied, amazed at how calm my own voice sounded. What time? 7 o'clock, and Alina, we really want you to know we appreciate how gracefully you've handled everything. Dad would be so proud. Yeah, Dad would be real proud if he knew what he actually thought of his gambling-addicted, debt-ridden sons. Hung up and drove toward what would likely be my final dinner as a Harrington. I realized something had shifted. The grief was still there, but it was now tempered with something hard, sharp, and focused. Marcus and Lucas thought they were so clever, manipulating a grieving widow, rushing me into decisions before my head cleared. They had no idea their father was 10 steps ahead of them the whole time. And they definitely didn't know that I was about to be 10 steps ahead of them. Dinner was going to be very interesting. As Lucas raised a glass to family, my hand instinctively tightened around the small box in my purse, the one holding the vault key. Marcus's eyes flickered down, lingering a second too long on my hand. You okay, Mom? He asked, his smile never reaching his eyes. My heart skipped. Did he suspect something? My phone vibrated under the Tabala text from Sophia. Found the Heart of the City contract in Lucas's files. Copy it now. My hands shook as I typed back, forcing a smile for Lucas sitting right next to me. Lucas's house in the wealthy part of town was a monument to borrowed money and hollow success. As I pulled into the circular driveway, I couldn't miss the brand new luxury cars, a BMW and a Mercedes worth more than an average person's annual salary. Now I knew where that money was coming from. Lucas's wife opened the door. In a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, at 38, she had perfected the art of looking expensive. $600 highlights every 8 weeks, weekly manicures, jewelry dripping with stones that required their own insurance policies. Alina? She chirped, leaning in for one of those air kisses that never actually touch skin. You look great. Are you hanging in there? The concern in her voice was as fake as her nail color, but I smiled and played along. I'm managing, dear. Thank you for having me. Marcus was already there, relaxing in Lucas's study with a glass of scotch, the kind of bottle that costs more than a month's rent. The room was all dark wood and leather, designed to scream success and stability. But now that I knew the truth, all it showed was a desperate, sweating attempt to keep up appearances. Mom, Marcus said, standing up to give me a light hug. You look better. I was so worried about you after our talk yesterday. Day he told me I was essentially homeless and bankrupt. The concern was touching, really. Lucas stepped out of the kitchen, swirling a glass of Chardonnay that looked expensive. Alina, so glad you made it. My wife's been in the kitchen all afternoon, her famous herb-crusted salmon. The three of them swirled around me like generous hosts, offering drinks, appetizers, and compliments. It was a masterclass in family theater. If I didn't know about their gambling debts and ghost projects, I would have been fooled. We sat down. In the formal dining room antique, china, silver forks that felt as heavy as weapons. The salmon was perfect. The wine pairing was flawless. So, Marcus said as we started the main course, Harold Jenkins called me this afternoon. He said, you're ready to move forward with the estate transfer. I took a slow bite of salmon to buy myself a few seconds. That's right. I've decided that fighting over Victor's final wishes isn't how I want to spend my remaining years. Family harmony is more important than money. The relief that washed over Lucas's face was almost comical. That's wonderful. Alina, truly. Dad would be so happy to know we're all working together. We've actually prepared some papers, Lucas's wife added, reaching for a yellow folder on the sideboard. Just to make everything official. Our lawyer drafted them to supplement what Harold is handling. Their lawyer, of course. They had their own legal shark in the water. I wondered if this mystery lawyer knew about Marcus's debt or Lucas's fraudulent schemes. How thoughtful, I said, not touching the folder. But I should mention, I've been thinking about that $280,000 medical debt. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marcus set his wine glass down a little too hard. What about it? Lucas asked, his voice casual but his eyes searching mine. Well, $280,000 is a lot of money. I was wondering if we should have an accountant double-check the estate's liquid assets before I officially take that burden onto my shoulders. Marcus and Lucas traded another look, that same telepathy I'd seen in Victor's office, but this time could read the subtext. They were terrified. Alina, Marcus said cautiously, I thought we explained that the estate assets are legally tied up. The medical bills are a separate liability. Course, I replied with my most pleasant voice. But Victor was incredibly meticulous with records. I'm sure there's documentation showing which expenses belong to the company and which are personal. Lucas's wife let out a loud, shrill laugh. Oh, Lucas handles all those boring financial details, don't you, honey? Lucas nodded fast. Exactly. It's all been categorized. The medical costs fall to you as the surviving spouse and the one who authorized treatment. Makes sense, I agreed, though I find it strange Victor never mentioned worrying about medical. Costi was always so confident our insurance was bulletproof. The silence stretched a beat too long. Marcus cleared his throat. Insurance doesn't cover everything. Unfortunately, Dad's specialized treatments in those last 6 months were astronomical. I knew I was dancing on a blade, but I couldn't resist pushing one more time. Maybe I should contact the hospital directly. Get an itemized breakdown of what's owed and what the insurance actually paid. Lucas's fork hit his china plate with a jarring clink. That's not necessary, Alina. I've already handled all of that very thoroughly. I'm sure you have, I said. But as Victor's widow, I feel it's my responsibility to understand exactly what happened financially in his final days. The least I can do to honor him. Lucas's wife stood up abruptly. Who wants dessert? I made a chocolate silk cake from a special recipe. She practically bolted into the kitchen. I didn't miss the warning. Look, Marcus shot Lucas. They were rattled. Alina, Marcus said, leaning forward with the face of a devoted son. I hope you aren't changing your mind about our agreement because of something you heard. People who don't understand inheritance law often give very misguided advice. Oh, no, I reassured him. I haven't changed a thing. I just want the details to be perfect. Victor always said, the devil is in the details, right? Lucas gave a forced laugh. Dad was definitely a paperwork addict. He was. Actually, while I was cleaning out his office, I kept finding documents that I just couldn't make heads or tails of. Bank statements for accounts I'd never heard of. Business papers for companies I didn't know he was involved in. For instance, that project Sophia once mentioned. Lucas's face suddenly went pale. What kind of documents? Oh, probably nothing important, I said. Just some confusing financial reports. Though I did find a strange bank card hidden in a secret drawer. Marcus froze. A bank card? Yes, strange, isn't it? I thought I knew all of Victor's financial arrangements, but it turns out he still had accounts and secrets, even I didn't know about. I think I should look into those thoroughly before we sign everything this weekend. The look the two brothers exchanged this time was pure panic, quickly suppressed, but unmistakable. Mom, Marcus said, his voice tight with forced calmness. You shouldn't exhaust yourself with all that paperwork. Legal documents can be very complicated for someone without a business background. Why don't you let Lucas and me help you review what you found? How sweet of you both, I said. But I think Victor would want me to understand the family's financial situation for myself. After all, I'll have to manage everything on my own from now on, won't I? Lucas's wife returned with the cake tray, her smile looking extremely strained. While eating dessert, the conversation shifted to safer topics. The Seattle weather, Lucas's new brokerage project, Marcus's investment fund. In the middle of dinner, my phone buzzed. It's an encrypted text from Sophia inside Lucas's office. Found the heart of the city contract. Copying now, my heart hammered. She was carrying out the dangerous mission we'd discussed, getting proof of the secret deal with the underworld. I had to stay calm, keep smiling at Marcus and Lucas while my insides felt like they were on fire. A moment later, a second text arrived. Caught. Lucas threatened my son. Sent documents to Rebecca. I am safe. We had a backup plan. If caught, Sophia would immediately call me with fake information to give me an excuse to leave. I silently thanked Sophia's bravery and lawyer Rebecca's rescue plan. However, the challenge wasn't over. As Marcus and Lucas pulled out a quick transfer deed, pushing me to sign right there at the dinner table under the guise of saving everyone time. Just administrative procedure. My phone rang. It was Sophia. I put it on speaker, pretending to be clumsy, and her trembling voice rang out. Alina, Marcus was just caught trying to bribe the head nurse to forge Victor's treatment records. Is he there with you? Marcus bolted upright, his face flushed. That's a lie. Who dares? But Lucas quickly pulled his arm down, his eyes wide with bewilderment. The room froze. I stood up, my face pale. I need air. I have to go now. I could feel the tension beneath those polite pleasantries, like an electric current waiting to explode. After dinner, as I prepared to leave, Marcus walked me to my Carolina, he said, his hand resting on my car door. About those documents you mentioned earlier, it's probably best if you bring them to our next meeting. Let us help you sort out what's important and what's not. Dad's filing system wasn't always logical. I smiled at him. It's the same pleasant smile I'd held all evening. Of course, Marcus. Family helps family, right? But as I drove away, I caught a glimpse of him in the rearview mirror, standing right on the driveway with his phone already pressed to his ear. He was making a call he couldn't wait to make until he got inside. As soon as I got home, my phone rang too. It was an unknown number. Mrs. Harrington, This is Rebecca Lawson from the Lawson Law Firm. I believe you found some documents that belong to our office. Ms. Lawson, I said, sitting in Victor's chair in the study. I've been waiting for this call. How did you know I found them? Your husband left very detailed instructions. If you found the bank card and the documents in the vault, I was to contact you within 24 hours. Ma'am, we need to meet as soon as possible. There are things about your husband's estate you need to know before you sign anything with Marcus and Lucas. What things? Things that will change everything, Mrs. Harrington. Everything. When I hung up and looked around Victor's study I realized that the shadow game I'd been playing all evening was about to move into the light. Marcus and Lucas thought they were manipulating a grieving widow, but they had no idea their father had been playing a much longer, more sophisticated game. Rebecca Lawson's office was nothing like Harold Jenkins's polished downtown suite. Tucked away in a modest building near downtown Seattle, it felt like a real place of work rather than a place to show off to clients. Rebecca herself was a surprise woman in her 40s, with a sharp, steady gaze that was both firm and empathetic. Mrs. Harrington, she said, rising from behind a desk piled with organized files. Thank you for coming so quickly, Mrs. Harrington. Please, have a seat. We have a lot to discuss. I sat down in the worn leather chair across from her desk, my hand clutching the purse containing Victor's letter. Ms. Lawson, I have to confess, I'm beyond confused. I didn't even know Victor had hired another lawyer. He hired me about 8 months ago, Rebecca said, pulling out a thick file. Initially, it was to conduct a discreet investigation into some financial irregularities he'd noticed. But as we uncovered more, my role expanded significantly. She opened the folder, and I could see copies of many of the documents I'd found in the vault along with others I'd never seen before. Your husband was a very thorough man, Mrs. Harrington, when he realized what his sons were plotting. He built a comprehensive strategy to protect you and ensure they faced the consequences of their actions. The investigation proved they were stealing from him. Rebecca nodded grimly. Marcus forged his father's signature on loan documents, using the family company as collateral for his gambling debts. Lucas was even worse. He systematically diverted funds from investor accounts into his own shell companies. Both face potential criminal charges if their actions are brought to light. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Criminal charges, embezzlement, financial fraud, elder abuse. My husband could have had them arrested. Instead, he chose a more creative form of justice. Rebecca pulled out another set of documents. These are the property records for the main house and the Puget Sound villa. As of 6 months ago, both properties were mortgaged to the hilt. Your husband took out mortgages totaling $1.2 million on the house and $800,000 on the villa. But why? We owned both properties free and clear, because he knew Marcus and Lucas would fight to inherit them. And he wanted to ensure they also inherited the massive debt attached. The proceeds from those mortgages are sitting safely in the Harrington Holdings account, to which only you have access. My head spun as I tried to process it all. So, when they inherit the properties, they inherit assets worth roughly $2.20 million, but with $2 million in mortgage debt. And that's not counting the $2 million penalty for the secret heart of the city deal they signed with the mob. They would owe more than the properties were even worth. How is that possible? They showed me the will. They showed you an old, invalidated will, Rebecca interrupted gently. That was superseded by a final version signed 6 weeks before he passed. The real will leaves everything to you, with absolute power of attorney. You have the right to gift the properties to Marcus and Lucas if you choose or not. The choice is entirely yours. She handed me a copy of the true will. As I read through the legal terms, one clause stood out. I leave the decision of what my sons, Marcus and Lucas, shall inherit, if anything, entirely to my beloved wife Elena, trusting in her wisdom and judgment to determine what they truly deserve. Victor left the decision to me, I whispered. Yes, and Mrs. Harrington, there's more. The life insurance isn't $350,000. It's $500,000, plus an additional policy for $300,000 that Marcus and Lucas know nothing about. That's $800,000 total. It's combined with the $5.5 million in the protected accounts. You aren't just financially secure. You are very wealthy. But here's the most important part, Rebecca continued. Your husband kept all the evidence. Every forged signature, every fraudulent transaction, every lie they told, and specifically, the audio evidence of them tampering with his pain medication. If you choose to pursue criminal charges, we have more than enough to ensure they serve time. The room seemed to tilt as the scale of Victor's plan became clear. He hadn't just protected me. He had made me the judge of Marcus and Lucas's fate. What happens if I don't prosecute, but I don't give them the properties either? They'll have nothing. They inherit their father's love and their childhood memories, and that's it. Meanwhile, they still face the debts they've accumulated. And the creditors waiting for their inheritance won't just go away. Before I could react, my phone rang again. That was Marcus. Don't answer, Rebecca advised. It's not time yet. There are still a few things you need to know. But the phone rang incessantly, its persistence fueling my unease. Finally, I picked up Alina. Marcus's voice was strained, bordering on panic. We need to talk now. There's been a new development. What development? Someone from a firm called Lawson Law called Lucas this morning. They're claiming there are documents that override the will we've been working with. This is very concerning, Alina. We think someone is trying to scam the estate. I looked at Rebecca. She was shaking her head with a cynical smirk. Marcus, I don't understand. What documents? Nonsensical legal papers. Listen, get to Harold Jenkins's office immediately. We need to clear this up before you sign anything or make a decision you might regret. The urgency in his voice betrayed him. They had realized they weren't inheriting what they thought, and they were spiraling. I'll be there in an hour, I said, and hung up. Rebecca leaned back. So, Mrs. Harrington, the moment of truth has arrived. What do you want to do? I looked down at the documents spread across the table, evidence of years of manipulation and theft, proof of Victor's meticulous plan, and the legal foundation for whatever choice I made next. I want to be clear on one thing, I said slowly. If I give them the properties with those mortgages attached, are they legally obligated to pay them? Absolutely. The mortgages stay with the titles. They'll have 30 days to refinance or assume the loans or face foreclosure. And with their current debts and trashed credit scores, no bank will touch them. They'll lose the properties and still owe a massive deficiency. I thought about last night's dinner, Lucas's wife in her designer dress. The luxury cars in their driveway, Marcus's constant arrogance, and Lucas's oily concern. I thought about 18 years of being treated like an outsider in my own home, being sidelined, patronized, and eventually betrayed. But most of all, thought of Victor lying in that hospital bed, knowing exactly what his sons were plotting, working even in his final weeks to protect me from their greed. Ms. Lawson, I said, standing up and straightening my skirt. I believe it's time Marcus and Lucas learned a lesson about the consequences of their choices. As I drove to Harold's office, my phone buzzed with increasingly desperate texts. Marcus, Mom, please don't sign anything until we clear this up. Lucas, Alina, there are people trying to take advantage of your grief. Be careful. Lucas's wife, we are all family. Don't let strangers come between us, family. They still thought they could. Manipulate me with that word, asterisk, but as I pulled into the parking garage, I realized something fundamental had changed. For the first time in 18 years, I wasn't walking into a meeting as Victor's wife or Marcus and Lucas's stepmother. I was walking in as Alina Harrington, a woman with $5.5 million in cash, a legal paper trail of their crimes, and the power to decide their future. The scared, grieving widow they thought they could break no longer existed. In her place was someone, far more dangerous someone, who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The conference room at Harold Jenkins's firm had never felt so small. Marcus and Lucas sat on one side of the polished mahogany table, their faces pale but set, in grim determination. Harold looked more uncomfortable than ever. Rebecca Lawson sat beside me, and next to her was Sophia, her face a mask of resolve. In front of Rebecca was a briefcase and a laptop. Before anyone speaks, Rebecca said in a calm, commanding voice, "I want you to know that we are going to present this evidence layer by layer, so you can see for yourselves exactly how you've lost." Marcus started to protest, but Rebecca flipped open her laptop and played a video on the large wall monitor. It was footage from a hidden camera in Victor's hospital room. The image was sharp. Victor was alert. Marcus walked in and set a stack of papers down.
"Don't worry, Dad," Marcus's voice on the video rang out. "Give me the power of attorney, and we'll get rid of her." Victor, his voice weak but clear, replied, "You're talking about Elena?" "No, absolutely not." The real Marcus sat at the table, his face turning a sickly shade of white. As the video ended, the screen shifted to another scene. It was Victor, filmed in his home office about 2 months before his passing, the moment he had just signed his final will with Rebecca. He had grown thin, but his eyes were bright and gentle. He looked directly into the lens, his voice deep and warm. "Elena, my love, if you are watching this, it means everything is going exactly as I planned. I knew you would find the truth. Remember, everything I did was for you and out of my absolute faith in you. I love you." That private message echoed in the dead silent room. Tears streamed down my face, falling openly for the first time in front of my enemies. Marcus and Lucas sat paralyzed, their faces as ashen as paper. For the first time, they saw the undeniable depth of the love their father had for me, the way he looked at the camera, a tenderness in his voice they had never heard directed at themselves. The truth they had tried so hard to deny all this time. "We aren't finished," Rebecca said. She played the audio from the health tracker, capturing the sounds of them swapping his medication and their cruel chatter about accelerating their father's death. "This is clear evidence of conspiracy to commit voluntary manslaughter." "And this," Sophia added, her voice resolute as she pulled a file from her briefcase, "is the copy of your secret contract to sell the heart of the city land with a 96-hour deadline. I took it." Harold Jenkins bolted upright, his face flushed. I had no idea. Did Victor not trust me even this much?" His voice was thick with shame and shock. He slumped back into his chair, his voice trembling. "Elena, I am so sorry. I unwittingly became a tool in their hands." He turned to Marcus and Lucas, his voice turning ice cold. "From this moment on, I withdraw as your legal counsel, and I will testify for Mrs. Harrington if necessary." Marcus tried to protest, but the words died in his throat. Lucas stared at the table, his hands clenched tight. Lucas's wife, who was present as family support, quietly stood up and walked out of the room, her face a mask of horror and despair as she realized who her husband truly was. Rebecca continued, flipping to page 47 of the preliminary estate distribution agreement they had signed. "Do you remember rushing to sign this when Sophia accidentally spilled her coffee, creating that little distraction so you wouldn't read the fine print? Drafted in dense legal jargon, Clause 12.7 doesn't just bind you to the $2 million penalty for the illegal heart of the city deal. It extends your liability to include all debts and potential legal obligations arising from any non-transparent transactions related to Victor Harrington's estate, including the ghost projects you used to defraud investors. The first payment is due tomorrow." Marcus and Lucas collapsed inwardly, the blood draining completely from their faces. I pushed the estate distribution agreement toward them. "Sign this," I said, my voice cold. "You take the 2 properties, along with every cent of the mortgage debt and the $2 million penalty. This is the only way I don't immediately hand over the medication tampering evidence to the police officers waiting outside that door." In a state of pure panic, Marcus and Lucas tremblingly signed, harboring the delusional hope that taking the debt would save them from criminal charges. They didn't realize Clause 12.7 had already locked the legal shackles around their necks. Rebecca gave a slight nod. The door swung open, and the police entered to take emergency statements. "This will ruin us," Lucas's wife sobbed. "We'll lose everything." "You should have thought of that before you started stealing from and poisoning your dying father," I said without a shred of mercy. Lucas looked at me with a flicker of begrudging respect. He really planned all of this. Every single detail. "Your father was much smarter than you ever gave him credit for." Finally, they signed. They had no choice but to accept a mountain of debt instead of immediate prison. 3 months later, I sold the properties after Marcus and Lucas inevitably defaulted on the debt and moved to a charming villa in Carmel, overlooking the Pacific. The $2.5 million home was paid for in cash, and I still have more money than I could spend in several lifetimes. My lawyer reported that Marcus filed for bankruptcy and is in court-mandated gambling rehab. Lucas lost his reputation entirely and is working as a night manager at a small hotel. His wife filed for divorce shortly after. Sometimes I think of Victor and wonder if he's satisfied with how it ended. The consequences were swift. The police had been waiting outside. When the meeting ended, they entered and served Marcus an emergency summons to the station for questioning regarding the attempted manslaughter, based on the audio and video evidence Rebecca had submitted. Because he couldn't close the heart of the city deal within the 96-hour window since the assets were legally frozen, Marcus was not only bankrupt, but was being hunted by the underworld for his gambling debts and the failed contract, while also facing lawsuits from defrauded foreign investors. As for Lucas, he was hit with a class action lawsuit from victims of his ghost projects. His luxury home was seized, and his personal assets were auctioned off. He was completely blacklisted by the local business community, losing both his reputation and his home. His wife filed for divorce immediately after. Then I look over at Sophia, standing beside me in front of the Harrington Legacy Hub construction site, and I know the answer. With the money Victor left behind, Sophia and I bought back the heart of the city land ourselves. Now a 3-story complex is rising. A supportive space for female entrepreneurs, social housing, and a formal legacy gallery where the original hand-drawn sketches are displayed. In the Legacy Gallery, we don't just show the first drafts, we tell the story of building the Harrington Empire from scratch, interwoven with lessons on business ethics, integrity, and the consequences of greed. A living warning for the younger generation. It is heartening to see business students and young entrepreneurs visit and share how this story has changed their perception of true success. During the grand opening, a group of young women supported by our foundation presented an expansion design for the complex. They drew direct inspiration from our original sketches, but modernized them with green technology and community spaces. Watching them present with radiant confidence, seeing the inheritance of creativity in the next generation, my heart overflowed with pride. I also used a portion of the profits to provide a full scholarship for Sophia's son to study urban design abroad, the same boy Lucas once threatened. One afternoon, Sophia visited Victor's grave. As she leaned down to place her flowers, she discovered a fresh white rose already there, placed secretly by me earlier that morning. Sophia smiled, laid her flowers beside it, and whispered, "We've done it. You can rest easy now. Your light is still here, and it's shining for so many people." In the new office of the Harrington Legacy Hub, the antique desk lamp sits in a place of honor. Its warm glow illuminates the framed sketches. It reminds me that truth and love ultimately triumph. Victor gave me the tools to protect myself, and now I use that legacy to help others write their own new stories. That is the true legacy. I didn't erase the past, I chose to give it a rebirth. Personal pain has been transformed into a sustainable community legacy. The antique lamp, where I found the key to the truth, no longer pierces the darkness of conspiracy, but lights the way for new dreams, exactly as Victor hoped. Yet, every night, I still face one final choice, the small box containing the evidence of Marcus and Lucas tampering with their father's medicine. In his letter, Victor wrote, "If possible, give them one last chance. They are still my flesh and blood. If I release the truth, justice will be served, but the cost is high. The foundation could be frozen, hundreds might lose opportunities, and children would lose their fathers. If I remain silent, I maintain a surface-level peace, but my conscience may never be fully at rest. knowing that evil might persist in the shadows. Victor once taught me, true legacy is what you sow in the next generation, integrity and the courage to face the truth. My story is a wake-up call. Never rely on verbal agreements. Protect your intellectual property with clear legal documents. Do not let your kindness be exploited through a lack of knowledge. What would you choose? Please share your thoughts. And if this story resonated with you, subscribe to join us in spring lessons of awareness and inner strength.